This is Twilight Prepper, back again for another situational update. I'm going ahead with everything. I haven't gotten any flags or any warnings over it, so a lot of people are just kind of blowing a little bit of smoke. I will say there has been a major development on several fronts out here with the, quote, cold civil war of the USA. This is one of those situations where it's like I was privy to some conversations as a child. I could go along and say a bunch of these situations and everything else, and probably either look really crazy or else have finally the little people with the suits and glasses, and they come by and knock on the door, and it's like, do I get to see 3 forms of identification? It's like, we know in school you were raised never to have any knowledge of what those 3 forms were, and you won't be able to cite them right. We went with the little thing to your brain and said no. Although I will remember them if you actually say them to me right. Now going along with everything here, as I probably need a fidget in my hand. Domestically, the big situational conversation for it is there was a time when the Attorney General and cabinet heads were given to other branches of the government other than the presidency. Right now, everything is seen as a non-domestic situation. That anyone that is found here will lead to a foreign national situation. All things turned over are considered foreign national because the president is our executive and represents both parties and their safety and that which is the appointed situations of these common good, just like judiciary. And anything that could have any personal situations over it. So, with that being said, the time of Emmett Till that most people don't remember of, the Attorney General was actually underneath the Congress. The Justice Department was, when I was born in the 1980s, till 1985, was underneath the Supreme Court. Okay, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, that meant that there could be basically a lot of local situations with the police. A lot of backdoor, go into the bar and take all that and do all that with other things that will not be mentioned because we're trying to leave the inflammatory towards the end. The same thing happened with the Justice Department. And just like listening to some of the police, it's like, well, we're really just shock troops, and any one of us can be pulled up to be in a SEAL team. Probably the police officer everybody wants to know whenever they get full of themselves. And they're all capable of joining SWAT because they just have to go and take the test. Anyway, moving along from there, everyone's supposed to report anything that is a felony or something they know of to the Justice Department for them to investigate. And then there showed up CSI. Anyway, all the local people had a truce back in the 80s that they had like these little, and as soon as you say anything, people always go, well, it's a rebellious area. That's really Spanish. Oh, it's an Irish area, or else they're, Irish against the church. That's really English or UK now. There's a bunch of rabble-rousers around here. That's really French. Even going back to like Rome and Italy, and even over into Greece with the unorthodox manner of approaches. That's all really ways of saying what we call a confederacy. Most people have only been taught that confederacy is, there's only one in the 1860s. When basically anything roundabout with anything that started here, even it went overseas, for overthrow was a confederacy. Any type of situation where there's like a loose organization of local police, attorney generals, even up to state level, that do not follow directly from Washington, D.C., as the police are supposed to do. Once the war of the millennia that they're all preparing for, and this conversation I was privy to, finished, whatever it is, it's like, you want to live here, we want to live here, we all want everything to stay the same. So until this war around the millennia, since something big's going to happen because someone's going to do it, because they've been brainwashed to do it, we're not going to say anything to you, you're not going to say anything to us, and we're going to let the international media in here and kind of be open with everybody and have equivalency to rights within reason. And anybody who steps out of line with it will be deported. We will have a way to deport you, and right now, Russia being at war with Ukraine does mean we can deport you to Europe, just like we do anybody for south of the border. If there was some sort of skirmish thing that we had, or like a NATO situation across the Pacific that was not with like Australia, the Commonwealth of UK, we could deport people back to China or Japan or anywhere else from basically World War II families, since we are still dealing with that in armistice. And all the places of armistice is there is a conflict. What it is World War II. We are still good with you. We'll get through this eventually. We're just not really talking to each other because we have no ability to say we're going at it the same way. Moving on from there, about 5 years after Donald Trump, when he left, and I'm going, on the 5th year here, end of his first year on his second term, I'm just going to say World War I is probably completely settled. Everyone's pushing right now, especially out West Coast, that it's all World War I, and that it's this German uprising from their sphere of influence in China and fentanyl. And they're trying to rally everyone around that and repeal the situation of Reconstruction settled from World War I. This being said, that really can't happen unless we have another truce with the kind of police situation, with them many local jurisdictions saying the Confederacy will always have a home in these counties. The Confederacy will always be welcomed in these areas. We just don't really follow the national standard, because we do things differently here. That's really not allowed, because the Attorney General and the police go with it, the office of it, to Washington, D.C. So this being done has pushed a lot of things in that direction. We have seen the border cabinet person or person underneath presidency for the border be told here in the last 48 hours that they will not come to their city in Massachusetts. They will not go in anywhere. And he has even said he is coming there and he is bringing hell with them. This is an open standoff of Confederacy, like in the 1820s, that then led to a situation, since certain things of the cabinet were there, with the War of New Orleans and 1812. People always sit there and look at me as going, I'm crazy and everything else. I'm probably sure we're going to find out there's some certain family crests that will be coming up and certain family flags that have even been registered here in the last 20 to 25 years. That's where the War of 1812 comes up as. Because the people under there actually went back to England and Canada, and then went from England and Canada at the Cromwell War, and that was over there in the mid-1800s, and they went to Germany and became basically Hitler's plainclothes intellectual people that ran around and tried to organize meetings against him politically without any arms or anything. So even if they didn't have arms or armaments or even a frying pan in their house, they then were sent to the gallows. Everybody tells me I'm absolutely crazy, but this is actually even looked up and documented in books such as the Osprey series and several others that you can look around on the internet. Even when they came back in the 1950s, in secret and in open protest, and were jailed in that which was Great Britain at the time, and led to the making of the new government of the UK. You can say yourself, I'm not of this, because the royal family is still in power and we are still allied with England, and they're handling things the way they do. That little bit said, and seeing how this can be something that could possibly leave, and we don't really want it to leave these shores, and we are not looking about sending any of our problems, and why I think the Monroe Doctrine is quashed right now and doesn't exist. Because of that, and anybody that we can send back, we're sending back. The other thing with it, going with the Monroe Doctrine here, locally and everywhere else, is the fact of the recent capture in the last 6 or 8 months. Shall we say, the leader of the Godfather army, El Chapo. People don't want to look at it as that, but technically, he is the evolution of the Godfather. And just like the Godfather, he was plagued with constant corruption within inside of his own system. His system was taken down over the last 5 to 7 years, mostly with taking many of the MS-13 women, selling them off with Dina bracelets on the border into eternal sexual slavery, as is prescribed in the Bible, since his group always followed a thing with him being basically a priest of new creation. They also tried to make a priest of new creation when the Godfather's time. That Bible has since gone the way of the dodo, and no one even knows probably anything about it unless they have like one of the only few probably copies, 100 maximum, still left in the world, that coined a new slave tribe through Christianity. Underneath El Chapo, there was 12 heads, and he was considered the mythical 13th. This kind of came up in pop culture with the 13th warrior, and a lot of things circled around with the number 13 that didn't have anything to do with the Knights Templar. The 12 underneath him were the 12 tribal heads that had forgotten their families' names and everything else from that which was original Hebrew, and only knew themselves through the church and where the church had put them and aligned them at. With the fall of his situation, much like the Godfather and everything else, with crime and the mafia plaguing the Godfather, and different forms of money and everything else not being clean enough or anything else, personnel coming in that wanted to assassinate him, and things were covered up and everything else, and the possibility that the Godfather even was, well, El Chapo here, was even a USA citizen who had his complete identity and everything else stolen by the Mussolinis, which is what the Godfather basically kept going after against. In this, El Chapo was supposed to be the leader, or else the king oligarch of that which was the Dina tribe from the NIV Bible. Most people don't really look at it like this or see anything with it, simply because there's so many things that they wouldn't go with. And that which is protecting the area of Jewish situations, not of an exodus or anything else, but wielding people and putting them in acid is a thing that Moses actually did. You can actually go to Rift Valley, where Moses would have been living at different times and other things in his life, and cook meat inside the stuff and eat the chicken that comes out of it. It's very interesting. It's on Discovery Channel. numerous things about cooking chicken in the Nile Rift Valley and the acid flats that are there. Anyway, moving along with that, with the destruction of this and El Chapo having a complete separation from tribal groups or anything that would have to do with that, which is unbaptized, unchristianed groups in the Americas as a protectorate situation. Tren de Agua, which comes back to a thing where it's like, I have met these people, I have been in their presence, I have conversated with them and everything else at a very young and early age, and they're still ripe and going on. And I will save that for another thing over there. New families out there. There's a book called Blood Brothers. It's a really thick book. I mean, seriously, it's about as thick as my head. And I've actually got it right over here. Bear with me one second. Blood Brotherhood. This is the story of Italy's mainland three mafias. It can actually go out even further once you incorporate the islands and a few others. I actually got one person who was a source that I really want to have like a face-to-face with him to actually mention the seventh Brotherhood. Anyway, after World War II, these are being remade. Epstein was the first and the central. The southern is the second that runs Tren de Agua. It is a very public, unlike the other family, and is running very much everything. They even claim certain things from the desert Southwest and everything as its own, just as the other claim certain lifestyle situations from the East Coast and the Central. I will say the North is probably going to be the hardest, and we will survive this, but it will be another error generation, 35 years to 25 years. With this and this book and everything, it's kind of a little bit of Cliff Notes. It gets a little wordy. You might get lost into it and be made into a little bit of history, but I'm just fortunate enough to have met 2, possibly 3 of these groups in my youth before I came across this little bit of light reading. I will say that there is, as much as I can excuse some of the things that El Chapo has done because of legal situations and everything, I can say here that I do know that his place was infiltrated. I do know that the Yakuza went against him and everything else well before there was any major organization of anything, all the way back in the late 70s and early 80s. Him being the age that he was, went and found however it was, if he got thrown out of the USA and people stole his house with a property transfer and took over the entire neighborhood and did things with some stolen badges and took whatever it was from the local people living in amongst everybody because they were a little too Mayberry. And, they didn't have someone who magically repelled the bullets off of them like when Andy Griffin was shot at. Just in saying this has major implications all the way across everything. This really does push the United States, either that it will accept complete Christianity and look at things as a human sacrifice with things such as that, or it will completely push the USA to pushing Christianity out of it, citing that there was a root cause situation, and with the family who is documented. This is one of the strange things. The central family tries to stay out of the limelight and gets scandals and tabloids over it. put into the situation. It's like even one of our local politicians from the past actually was kind of forced in there, and it's like, you'll take the blame for everything and all this other stuff, and all these other people became world-renowned people. And even if they were dirty or clean or however it was, and half of his people would laugh and be like, dude, the guy's last name is even this, and you just say, because we made up the blood test, that he's not from Germany, or not one of us, replacing the Germans. Because that's what we were doing when any of them would die or just be too pathetic at their house. We'd just go there and raffle it off. So we just sent the blonde Italians there that we couldn't get along with. I mean, it's really kind of funny whenever they get going. And the other one doesn't mind being on there talking about nature and all the great stuff and global warming and stopping all that. And they have a lot of things. They even have a thing that overlooks the Mediterranean. They've had the Pope meet with them, different popes, and be like, when are you going to give this up? Because this plant is just as good here as that is. Oh, no, these are really good. And it's like, in a way, they're freelance colonizing. They like Harris Hawks, too. I'm not sure how I can stare you down and try and sell that to you, but I know they can visit here and you would never even know they left their place or establishment. Just catch up with family. Like Trent's been doing the last few months here, touching base. And while El Chapo's people came from Native American groups that, yeah, you could prove it, but they're separate from there, and no matter what, they'll just instantly go and get the kids christened. Even if they say they wouldn't, for some reason they just start walking towards there. And they're not supposed to have anything to do with them. The trend is supposed to have any people that can mimic or look like any form and pass themselves off as pure steaks when they're nothing but baloney. And if there's a semblance in that for a certain school of Bologna and espionage, take it for whatever it is. Moving along with that, this is the quintessential little nugget here. If they could infiltrate into them, they can infiltrate into the tribal situation. Almost, it's guaranteed. It's just the next step. And with that being gone through and everything, well, I'm sure that I could put down 2 or 3 hours worth of information or something else on that. The whole situation is just like with the Godfather. You got to leave the women out of it. People who broke into it and interloped in, they made sure that the women weren't left out of it. They went right to the Godfather's house in New York and made sure they put the women right front and center on the biggest abuse they ever could. I wanted to say, yeah, some of them are running for something, or I don't understand, because, I even had the FBI wanting to sell me some of the girls out there. Undercover and, basically just hey, I'm retired and I just like wearing my badge all day because, hell, they got it. It's like, you don't put down the merit badges for some reason. It's like, I'm just retired. See, it says right underneath it, retired. I'm just wearing it. Anything happening? Why don't you go down there to the border and buy yourself Gracie? There's hundreds of them right now. We all know they're Gracies. I am seriously, even my boss in enclosed areas with 4 cameras on them. And they're Oak Ridge cameras too, because too many of them are related to scientists that work there. My life. I'm just trying to have a normal one. If I was out looking for it, I'd never, ever have it occur to me or anything. Moving on from there, another thing that's probably working its way up through there is that there is a member of this very important family that you could say is a schizophrenic babbling brook. And has had meetings with the Mussolini family, who has been out on their doorsteps around someplace in Hawkins County where two cities meet, screaming that you can't deport them for any reason, and that you cannot send them back for any reason, and that they'll just start replacing people again. This has made its way all the way to me over the last week or so, and it's like, yeah, so as long as there's war in Europe, they can deport people back there to it. It's under our things with NATO. If there's no war, can't do that. Anyway, one of the people in that person's family had a big conversation with the Babbling Brook, who it's like they don't really always talk to everyone, and everyone has a huge family. I understand. They'll find out that my 9th cousin is somebody like in China and, a famous actor, so I must be a boxer. Or, my 9th or 10th cousin is El Chapo. And, it's like, yeah, what you make of it. They'll find out that somehow in that, like, cluster of the 4th or 5th, that somehow I'm related over in somewhere with a bunch of people that supposedly are Native American, but there's no slaves ever sold to the wherever it was, even way back when. And it's like, oh, wow, due to all this and food and everything, they've been there for about 1,500 years. But, and the locals still don't touch them. Unless it's just take them out drunk and having fun with them. They didn't die in the ditch. Anyway, moving along from this and everything else with it, and trying to keep it only with the Babbling Brook, and this person that doesn't, this person's family member who doesn't want to be deported, with another conversation that they made sure I'd know about, because they've even told me when Fox News has been filming it, and I've watched it on my thing, and it's like they're just off property where my security thing is, and you can't do nothing, can't cross the line or anything else. It's like, that village they're shooting up right there, we found your all stuff, we got them to do ancestry. They're more than 20 yards away, so I couldn't tell if they were smiling with a thumbs up. And anyway, these people got into a beef, and they shot each other's buddies. And then the Babbling Brook had a conversation with this Mussolini, and the Mussolini had taken over and was using a puppet person for the Esse States, running the border. And this has been all the way back at, like, say, 1986 to 1989. I mean, even if there was videotape and it was around a national mine for uranium that had a certain byproduct that they sold off, that the Swiss sell off from their uranium mining, and we brag over who's got the purest one of that, they wouldn't find it. Even if Fort Bragg said they had all their people go straight from all their, like, hacking brag stuff, they wouldn't find it. Just being as honest with you as humanly possible, the whole situation is, the Babbling Brooks killed and took over and replaced the Gulf state. So the Babbling Brook, let's say, and I understand that, there's family members you just don't talk to or something else, and on the other side of wherever, but they have the same name and keep up with stuff and will embarrass somebody if they happen to talk about family business. Well, with this, who's controlling the Dina bracelets and everything being sold and going in and clearing out the farm towns because they know how to raise cattle and walk back and forth to different places and grow corn and eggs. And a lot of other vegetables too, probably, and maybe even go into agave and need to have a tequila expanded from a certain redhead that looks very close to a Afghanistan liberator who fought for the Taliban. When it's shown out there with his black twinkling eyes and red hair that was down to basically about here. Really skinny, slim build. Also got some things of him shooting stingers into tanks. They just look like people. People just look like people. But, you know, Afghanistan buys most of its chemicals from China. All the fentanyl has Chinese chemical markers in it because they can't make their own yet. Esse State would be doing this, controlling the border. Best way to get rid of a tribalistic population before it becomes tribal again is to get rid of its women and children and radicalize MS-13 more than whatever it was, and then step in and take over and just go at a very steady turtle pace with trend. Kind of like, you know, they don't really know what they're doing, really, do they? You went there with a claw hammer to beat a doorknob off instead of a sledgehammer. And a little mini sledge, you can slide that thing right up your arm, you know, over at Walmart and walk right out with it. And most places won't even send you to jail for, you know, $5 hammer. Not that I've ever done that. I just worked at Walmart for 7 years. And watched them how they use it in the store to take the calculators that are $100. Anyway, moving along. The argument that the Mussolini and the other one had was that they don't touch the land and they only deal with the port situations. And there'll be big port situations coming up for them. Now with this, there's been a lot of changeover. There's been a lot of the, quote, quiet riots. There's been, even on YouTube, you can find abandoned towns of the southern Piedmont. These are actually real sources you can look up. There are complete ghost towns. Not one person living in them. They are, without a doubt, probably the greatest way to say that, I mean, you can't deploy people with their families overseas during war. Okay, all the men went off. Women can still run gas stations and do the ordering and stuff. I understand religion with certain things and things like that. Culturalistic practices, but everything right down to the schools and everything. I mean, these people are paid just to drive around on YouTube and videotape it, and they get like 30,000 views and have like thousands of subscribers, tens of thousands of subscribers. Anyway, I know I'm going a little long here on it, but there's kind of the domestic things out there. I mean, you have these like Confederate cities, similar like how they went to Birmingham, Alabama, and places and pushed the old papal residents out, and went through Mississippi and Texas, where there was this burgeoning pioneer area, and that wasn't going to happen there or anything. And then, lo and behold, how did it show up over here in Richmond, so close to the capital? There's a lot of stuff in the USA, Meso-America area that's really coming into play big time here. And it's going to be coming in more to play with our resources and stuff as they try and move us like the USSR was. And that, they wanted to annex Mongolia and they would get its independence back and everything after World War II. They wanted to buy Finland because of all of its debt that it had, or certain islands out there. Buy certain areas for food production in Africa and make it like a kind of like a colony there of the main country that was there, but not be for Russia and it become Russia, and that maybe they would be able to become part of the government and that they could run everything with Russian farming regulations and transport it out directly to Russia. Other things like that. Soviet Union, old USSR, or Soviet. I say soul too much. But anyway, there's a lot of things that are paralleling this, but there's also a lot of things that are coming not really totally in line. And with everything, if there is something that becomes a hot civil war, and I will say it'll probably be in the 18 months to second year for this, if some of the people like in Doge get a military situation or rank like that can be bestowed by the president for commendable situations, or learn the judge advocate general situation and go through some of these kind of like frivolous police investigations, so they can charge the government and go, we're becoming more and more national police underneath the attorney general, as they siphon money off into the area over like, we need to monitor this guy, we need to know what this guy knows. And they don't ever ask a question, because it's like this is a pointless question over in court of law or anything of a legal investigation. Tell me everything. You can't really do that. It's like, tell you everything in what context. You have to put a context into it. Most people don't realize that. Now, in saying this, I know I'm going to be looked at as a little bit of a dumb idiot going, you would actually fall for that? You wouldn't believe how many people do. Now, it's like, we're brought in here, it's like, what is the situation we're talking about? Anything with the president, let's just say. Okay, tell me everything. You have to have a specific time, date, or incident. I know that sounds dumb, I know it sounds bad, but it is the truth. Anyway, I think I've hit every single thing out there on it. I've been listening to Canadian Prepper. Big kudos to him, with him going on about Elon's due for an assassination attempt or something. I'm not really looking at it until he gets into taking money from people that want the money to buy arms and armaments and body armor and vehicles. Once those starts going kind of like, well, you're not really in line with the United States national government, the united national government of democratic and republican ideals. See, we're not really a democracy, we're a democratic republic. We're not really a republic or republics, we're a democratic Republican United Nation of independent states. Once they start going in there and pushing it after probably the 5th year, somehow someone in there is going to probably get something, and that's when the dominoes are going to start falling into place. That, like, you're not going to have these guys that look like they live out of the car or homeless or something else that are naturally unlucky. It's like, I'd hate saying that it's not a miracle by the creator or something else, but it is that they naturally have a bad luck cloud over them by the way they are. Once a skilled professional does get in there, or some of these people that do this for a living and just turn their skills in the opposite direction, there's where it comes up at. For me, at least, saying it. Not advocating any assassination attempts on anybody's life. Seriously, look at all options. If you really don't like the person, and go, does it fit legally? Okay, you can impeach him. Don't you need to write your senators and people over needing legislation for this so that this never happens again? It's not that hard. Granted, there's all the grandfather clauses, and, you can't just legally get rid of it, and it's always the next one around, because that's how Harry S. Truman could run for third terms and stuff, and so on and so on. With all this being said, this is Twilight Prepper. My battery is about dead, so I will leave this right there for it. The Meso-America, various Mussolini mafia takeovers, the new blood brotherhoods, and the family heads being made over in Italy. One of them that we already went through was the Epstein era for the central family. And we're in the southern family right now, and it's starting up. Tren de Agua infiltrating MS-13 and radicalizing it, even having their own people go to jail. And permanently labeled that they're not. So whenever they get out, they'll just hook back up with them, probably, or else have some sort of clash that'll take out at least a quarter of a city, so they can kind of just put their gardeners and farmers and laundry people and weapons people there, since they won't be on the front lines. Bankers and stuff. Stockbrokers even. But let's just go along with, and then the bringing hell to Massachusetts. And the standoff that will be there. It's a warm-up for whatever it is towards the West Coast. And when they start taking identities away from Colorado and Wyoming Native Americans and saying they're really Mexicans and all of that. Wait until the big hoopla happens out there, because that's when I think the 25-year plan will go into effect, and something will happen over at NORAD and some of its other areas where you go in at from there, and even the history of the United States over with Cody, Wyoming versus the Elon Musk underground superstructure. But that's for another day. It's Twilight Prepper, signing out.